but we can get started. The one thing that I don't like about recording is that then it doesn't let me minimize my screen. So I can't like keep the bubble in the corner and see if somebody is trying to talk while I'm also looking at the Torah portion, the Sefaria screen.
Yeah. Well, Debbie must have meant please record because her mother's appointment is 12 something. So
right. And it's easier to record honestly than to stream.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know, be loud if you need my attention while I'm looking at the
right.
We'll just be rude and interrupt like this.
It's not rude, it's excited.
Thank you for the reframe.
Yeah.
So you don't see our hands go up if we hit the hands thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm looking at you right now, but if I'm going to click over to look at the Sefaria page, and I can't also see you.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. All right. So just the summary. This is a good one. They're all good ones right now. We're in Genesis. Everything is easy, you know? Yeah. So it starts off where last week's Parsha ends, but you know, sometimes the segues aren't as clean. But this one is like, okay, so last week Jacob steals the birthright and the blessing from Esau, and now he's on the run. So this Parsha opens with the first night after he's left his parents' house. He comes to the place. That's what the Hebrew says, Hamakom. So a lot of the rabbinic commentaries say this place must be significant, and so they attribute it to it's Mount Moriah, where Abraham nearly sacrificed Isaac, and or B, it's the Temple Mount, where the temple will stand in Jerusalem in years to come. But the text doesn't actually say any of that. It just says Jacob encountered this place, and he lay down to sleep. Another interesting thing about this is that the text says when he lies down to go to sleep, it uses avanim plural, like there are two stones, and then when it says he woke up, it says he set the stone singular up as a monument to God on that place. So there's also some fun midrash about how the stones were like arguing about who gets to be our father Jacob's pillow, and then they like fused together to become one stone, and it's super cute. But anyway, again, just like a fun little play with the text.
Maybe one stone was Leah and one stone was Rachel.
Ooh, I like that. So he fell asleep sort of on both of them, but woke up with maybe which one is the one that prevails then? Because on the one hand, Rachel's the one he loves, but she dies younger.
They merged.
Okay. To be one mother of all of the children of Israel.
Yep.
Okay. I like it. Yeah, David Gilbert.
We could be numerological and toss in Bilhah and Zilpah, and that way you have all four merge, and the four is the tetragrammaton. And
ooh.
All right.
I like that. I saw a picture on like a Jewish meme page on Facebook today of like Star Wars characters, and so one has a lightsaber and has just one light coming out the end, and it says Abraham, and then the next panel is the same character but holding one of those double-sided lightsabers, and it says Isaac, or not Isaac, sorry, Isaac has just the one, and then Abraham has the two, and it says Sarah and Hagar on either end of the laser. And then the next one is some alien creature that has 4 arms and he's got like lights going in every direction. It says Jacob.
Jacob.
Jacob and his many wives. Anyway, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So after he falls asleep on the 2 stones and he has the dream about the angels ascending and descending, the ladder going up all the way to heaven, and he wakes up and he puts up the stone that has merged together up as a monument to God, and names this place Beth El, the house of God, or Beit El, which is then like, so that's the Temple Mount. And then he continues on his journey. He arrives at his uncle's house, Lavan, and he sees Rachel first. Immediately, like, it's love at first sight. She's so pretty. And he puts jewelry on her, bracelets, I think the text says specifically, and like pronounces that he's going to marry her. So she goes home and excitedly tells her father what just happened. Oh, I'm going to get married. And Lavan is like, well, no, hold up. So first, he tricks Jacob to marry off his older daughter first, Leah. And then when Jacob complains and says, like, this is not the one I agreed to marry, Lavan says, you can have the other one too. You can have Rachel as well, but you have to work for me for another 7 years. So Jacob ends up working for 14 years to receive Rachel's hand in marriage. And then he works for another 7 years to accumulate all of the wealth and flock and everything that he does. And it says that he's very good with the sheep. There's something, I don't really understand animal husbandry, but there's something about like the way he makes the sheep that like the flock that like Lavan has established, like all of the offspring of that look like this, you can keep when you move on, but all of the offspring that look like this, I will keep when you move on. But Jacob like knows how to mate them correctly. So he gets all of the like the spotted ones, I think, are the ones that he can keep. And he manages to breed like a huge flock of very healthy spotted sheep. So he's like very good with the animal stuff. He like knows what he's doing. And then in this portion as well, all 12 sons and the 1 daughter are born. And there's lots that goes on with the wives and the children, but those are like the main points. So we did already talk a little bit about, you guys have brought up Rachel and Leah. Do we want to dissect more of that, their relationship or their relationships with Jacob, or did anybody have any questions? Where should we start? Terry, is that a finger? Is that a hand?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I thought I had read
Yes.
that Jacob had put a particular pole in the water that the flock drank from, and that created, I mean, that's not true animal husbandry, but I was curious.
Sure. Yeah. Right. He made striped poles for the strong and robust sheep to view while they were mating.
Yeah.
Thus, they gave birth to striped. What's the bait? What's the word? Lambs?
Lambs and kids.
Yeah.
Not modern farmer, but it worked.
Sure. Yeah. That's how it works. You look at the things and then, and then that's what your children look like. Actually, do you know that there are pieces of the Talmud that talk of like this, that like if you look at a flower when you conceive your child, then the child will come out dainty like a flower. If you look, like the Talmud believes this very deeply as well, and about human children, that like
The forerunner of genetics.
yeah, right, that what you were, the environment in which the child was conceived, the sometimes like different positions will determine the gender of the baby, things like this. So they, it's not that far off that
No,
Jacob
no,
believed planting a pole that had stripes in it would give him striped sheep. Yeah, you're muted though. Yeah, okay.
My take on that was that he kind of conditioned them to know to go there to drink. And that's the way he separated the ones that were already speckled from Laban's pure white flock or whatever, which was supposed to be superior, I think. But
Right.
he conditioned them to look for those poles. That's where you go, and that's where you drink, and that's where you mate, and therefore you have more of those.
Right.
It was like a conditioning sort of thing. Here's your pen, not over there.
Right. That makes sense.
yep,
But I feel like it also is intuitive. I mean, again, I don't know anything, but it seems to me that if at the time the pure white flock were considered healthier, better, prettier, whatever, but Jacob was willing to take the ones that had markings in their fur or their wool or whatever, but they still were robust, healthy sheep, like that's still smart and quick thinking of him to like settle, but then still end up with this much healthier, thriving flock that will still give him wool and milk and food.
yes,
And wealth.
Wealth, exactly. Yeah, he leaves a very wealthy man by the time that he runs away from his father-in-law.
Yeah, when you see what he's willing to give Esau.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a lot of stuff if he could give that much away and then still have. He had a lot of animals, he had a lot of camels, whatever. Asses.
Yes. Always a favorite when you read it with children. Yeah, but that's next week's Parsha that that the stuff with Esau happens. So let's
Yeah, sorry, I had to read to a more natural and break in the story.
Okay.
I also thought where this one began was like, I don't know, like I thought Isaac was dying, and all of a sudden Rebecca's talking to Isaac that what good will her life be if her son marries a Hittite woman or something. I had a little trouble following the chronology.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is, wait, hold on, where I had scrolled all the way to the bottom. Now I want to go back up to where that happens, to where it starts. Okay.
Of course, I could have started in the wrong place too.
Yeah, I think that's the end of last week. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we were supposed to start at 3:10.
Yes,
10.
at 10.
Okay.
Jacob
Again, I
left Beersheba and set out for Haran.
had to go back to catch up with the story.
Yeah, it's not, but also like even within last week's Parsha, it's not super clear. I mean, right, the part where we're told he's dying is because he's blind. Like he could live another 15 years blind. I mean, he could live in, I mean, whatever, like that's not necessarily a mark of his deathbed, but they treated it like that. So who knows how close he was.
Well, I read it as more of Rebecca's stage managing behind the scenes. You know, here she's already arranged for Jacob to get Esau's blessing, and didn't just suggest it. I mean, she was the lead conspirator there, and then she tells Jacob, "Listen, your brother wants to kill you. You need to go and stay with my brother Laban."
Mhm.
For safety, he'll forget about it and I'll send for you. And then the next verse is her going to Isaac, her husband, and saying, listen, you know, what is my life worth if our son goes and marries a Hittite like these women here, and then backs off. And the very next verse we get is Isaac saying to Jacob, listen, you know, this is where I want you to go and find a wife. And
Right.
it wasn't his idea in my reading. This was all Rebecca running things.
I also kind of think I'm just realizing this now, so this is not a well thought out, or I don't know if the other rabbis say this, but there's something to this to me too, of like her, you know, declaring the terribleness of having Hittite daughters-in-law, and like, what does that mean for our descendants and whatever. And so then the blessing that Isaac gives to Jacob about like, you have to go marry someone from our family line, and like that will wait, where is the line? He says like that will make you, do not take a wife from among the Canaanite women. Go to the house of Bethuel, to your mother's father, and take a wife there. And then may El Shaddai bless you, make you fertile and numerous, so that you become an assembly of peoples. May he grant the blessing of Abraham to you and your offspring, that you may possess where you are sojourning. So he's already given Jacob the like official blessing of, you know, you'll be the next in line in this chain from Abraham to the great nation that we're promised. But there's something sort of justifying about the marriage issue of like, our great line cannot be continued if it's sullied with these Hittite women. We need to keep it pure. So go marry the Canaanite woman. And since Esau's already married a Hittite woman, like he's already ruled out. So blessing or no, like he's dropped the ball. He can't be, you know, the spiritual ancestor for the Jewish people. Like it's really Rebecca's like turning the screw or whatever, you know? I don't know if that's the right metaphor, but like she's finishing the job.
Well, another thing, you know, I'm new to all this, is so are the Hittites and the Canaanites the same people?
My understanding, and it's a little hard to tell from the text itself, and I'm not an ancient Near Eastern historian or archaeologist, but my understanding is that Canaanite is like an umbrella term, and then it includes all of the like different tribes that lived in that land. So that includes the Hittites, but like could also be like later in the Bible, sometimes Philistine and Canaanite are used interchangeably. So yeah, I think Canaanite is a broad term.
How come Laban's wife isn't ever mentioned?
I don't know.
Or what should we make of that? You know, Isaac has his wife who's involved in everything. And maybe that's why that's one of the reasons she sent Jacob there, was because there was no wife who was going to interfere with things.
Yeah, he couldn't trust that for another woman not to meddle.
Not to be as conniving as she was.
Yeah, that's possible. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of women that don't get mentioned or don't get airtime, but it is sort of unusual that I feel like Noah's wife is mentioned at least in passing. You know, Noah took his wife and his children onto the ark. Like, I don't feel like we ever see the words Lavan's wife.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Me
Yeah.
or us as
Well, yeah,
general?
anyone.
I just, either that she's no longer in the picture, or she's so, what's the word I want? You know, so spineless that Rebecca's not worried about sending his son there, as well as keeping it in the family line. But does she just have one brother? I don't.
Yeah. I mean, in the scene where Rebecca becomes betrothed, Lavan is there, and so yes, I do feel fairly certain that they are the only siblings, Rebecca and Lavan. And it doesn't tell us how old he is, and it's not terribly unusual for a daughter to get married younger. So we don't. So it's not super noticeable that he's not married or that a wife isn't mentioned at that point. But now that he has children of his own that he's marrying off, it is a little strange that it's not mentioned at all what the deal with his wife would be.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were Isaac and Rebecca not a little bit concerned when Jacob didn't show up for 21 years?
Nah. I don't know. I mean, presumably there was some messages, right? Like if it's with her brother, they maybe had some form of communication. And I don't know that Isaac lived. We don't know how long Isaac lived after that.
Because when he goes back, Isaac's not mentioned, right? Isaac's not alive. Assumed Isaac's not alive.
Yeah. Well, even when he and Esau reconnect, it's not necessarily back home. They like meet on the road somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Esau travels to meet up with him.
Right. So do they ever, like, does Rebecca ever come back up again? I can't remember now. No, I don't think she does. I've read the Red 10 a couple times now, and so that feels like very in my head, these images that Anita Diamond has filled in for me are, part of how I read these stories now to a large extent. So I forget sometimes. Because in the Red 10, there is a scene where they go back and visit Rebecca, and she's this like very forbidding woman. She like stays in the tent, and all of the grandchildren have to like come and bring her a gift and like receive their special blessing. And she's like very, it's unnerving for the kids and annoying to all the daughters-in-law. They're like, oh my God, we gotta go visit this one. And Isaac is already gone at that point, I believe, or he's so sick that he's might as well be gone. But that's not in the text. So, anyway, we're doing a lot of zigzagging. because the story is so like it's such a strong arc. But I want to focus on this week's parsha. So let's go back to that, to the children, to Rachel and Leah and all of their children. Perhaps there's plenty there. There are these baby wars between the two women, and so it's really interesting to me how these patterns play out in the Bible with like recurring themes, right? So Sarah and Rebecca and now Rachel all have issues with infertility. Sarah has a little bit of the jealousy issue with Hagar when she has Ishmael, but it's pretty immediately like sealed off because then she still has Isaac, and Isaac becomes the favored child, and Ishmael and Hagar are like kicked out. Rebecca still ends up giving birth, and there's no concubine in that story. Rachel does end up giving birth, but because Leah is the first wife, it's not the same. Even though Rachel's more beloved and her children become more favored by Jacob, it's not the same kind of scenario as Sarah had with Hagar. Rachel cannot kick Leah out of the camp. She cannot demand that her children, she has two of her from her own womb. She cannot demand that they have like better inheritance. I mean, you know, Joseph gets the coat and there's favoritism, but we don't know for sure that there's any plan for Jacob to subvert the usual order of how he dispenses his material inheritance to his sons. And Rachel is kind of powerless to do anything about it. It also reminds me a little bit of the way that they are in such competition, and it's not just petty jealous. I mean, there is petty jealousy, but doesn't feel as petty as with Sarah and Hagar, because there is more of this like even footing between them. And so the competition is a little bit more real. Whereas with Sarah, like she was kind of being dramatic, I think. Like, anyway. But so it reminds me of Hannah and Peninnah in the Samuel story, the Haftarah that we read on Rosh Hashanah, where again they're both equal wives. We are told that Elchanan loves Hannah more, but as far as we can see, there's no. We don't know which one is the first wife, but they're both fully wives. Neither is like a concubine. And even after Hannah does give birth, you know, she prays and prays and prays for God to fix her barrenness, and she does give birth, but it's still Peninnah's children that receive the material inheritance, at least, because she, as soon as Samuel is weaned, she drops him off at the temple and never sees him again. So there's something a little, I don't know, reminiscent of that for me here too. With, I mean, Rachel doesn't drop her children off somewhere and like abandon them, but as far as we can see, they don't necessarily get a leg up within the family inheritance. She does die giving birth to the second one. That's not in this parsha, but that happens, that she dies giving birth to Benjamin. And so she doesn't get to know her children really, in a way that is similar to Hannah, whereas Leah has lots of time with hers, especially Reuben being the oldest. Like she has Reuben young enough that like by the time he is grown, the youngest concubine is closer to Reuben's age than to Jacob's age, and like they have their own affair. You know, so that just gives you some idea of like the range of family dynamics here. It's not just about, you know, when we get to the Joseph story, we talk a lot about the favoritism and the whatever, and that Jacob, all of Jacob's faults for how he handles some of these family dynamics. And I do think like he's a little naive in how he shows his favoritism, and he's like not very smart about how he handles some of these dynamics, but or sensitive, I should say, more than he's not very sensitive. But also like a lot of this is not just about him and how he handles it. There are so many pieces here with just like the age range of the children, the different concubines, the wives, their own sibling rivalry that then plays out with their, you know, their competition over their importance to Jacob. Like, you know, there's a lot.
Just like real families.
Yeah. Well, I don't know any families with 12 children. I know they exist, but I don't know them. So, yeah.
I've just been thinking, you know, as you've been talking about understanding these family dynamics through the culture of the time they occurred.
Mm-hmm.
To, I don't know, put it in a different perspective, to understand it differently.
Yes. Well, so certainly I think that's a huge part of the baby war, right? Is that part of it's whatever, their own sibling rivalry and vying for Jacob's attention and giving him heirs and whatever. But also, I mean, that's a huge cultural context for them, is that was how a woman, especially, I mean, a little bit for anybody, you wanted to have a legacy and you wanted to know that like somebody's going to inherit your work and somebody's going to help you work the fields and grow your flock and all that. Children were important, but especially for women, their ability to give sons to be those heirs was a huge component of their like worth. And so the biblical authors here, I think, are definitely playing with that a little bit in, you know, they make really clear that Leah does not feel loved.
Right.
There's a comment about her eyes, which is a little unclear. Does she have bad vision? Does she have weird shaped eyes? Is she ugly? Is she whatever? Again, the red tent, she has different colored eyes. Like one is blue and one is brown, and that's really off-putting, and people think she's cursed and whatever when she's growing up. The text is unclear. It just says that she has bad eyes or something. The adjective is not clear. But so there's something with that, and also just possibly like whatever, you can't make someone love you, and somehow she got sidled with this man that really loves her sister. But then to make up for it, right? Like she not only is winning the baby wars, she's so fertile in a story, like a family narrative that involves a lot of barrenness, right? Like nobody else, no other important female in the Bible is fertile like this. Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Hannah, they all struggle with conceiving. Samson's mother, whose name I don't think we get to know, but there's like an important story about how she's barren, and then there's a, you know, annunciation story where an angel comes and tells her that Samson will be born. All of these people, and then even some of the other women who, like, we don't really know anything about their fertility, but like Deborah, Yael, it's just not part of their story, so we don't know one way or the other if they have children, if they struggled with it, whatever. But there's no like named woman in the Bible that has children easily the way Leah does. So there's something really significant to that. And then the fact that, like, she has one daughter, but she has, I don't know, I have to count now, but she has like 7 sons, including a set of twins, I believe, or maybe that, again, that's a red tent thing. But like, she gives Jacob many strapping boys.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't quite make her any more beloved. Sorry, I'm trying to look at I'm looking for all of the birth stories.
Jacob and sons.
Yeah, exactly.
While you're looking, can I ask something?
Yeah.
So they're aware of their worth is based on bearing strapping boys and who can tend the flocks and the farms and stuff. Are they also aware they're bearing children that will be the inheritors of the kingdom of God? Because that would seem to be a big, like, if you have the first boy, that's a big deal if they're aware of the whole lineage.
In the interpretation I read, I have the women's commentary. It said that their job was to, what you said, Nancy, to populate Israel.
Yeah, I think we have to assume there's no like conversation either with God or with Jacob and the women that says that like explains to them, and even though they're from the same family, they've grown up in Lavan's house and with his idols. But to some extent, I think it's clear that they know that Jacob is special in like a divine sense. And then at the very least, if they don't already know when they start having the children, at the end of this parsha, when Rachel steals the idols, it's pretty clear that this family does not worship idols. Like the way that she does it, the way that she hides it, the way that Jacob doesn't approve of it, I think she'd have to know by the end of that we are forging a new spiritual path and the idols are not a part of it. Again, I guess that doesn't fully explain how much she knows about the promise of the great nation, but I think they must have some sense of it.
So again, my vision is skewed by the red tent. But she takes the idols because she doesn't want to separate herself from them, or because she wants to take away Laban's faith.
It's not clear in the text. I think the most basic answer is probably that they're valuable, like materially. They're made of gold or some kind of precious material. But it's also possible. Hold on, I'm looking for the text itself. Meanwhile, Rachel had taken the idols and placed them in the camel cushion and sat on them. Lavan rummaged through the tent without finding them. Um, and she tells him she's on her period, so it's not appropriate for him to be in the tent, and he gets scared and runs away.
Class, huh?
What?
Nothing.
So yeah, so we don't really know. I think probably the most straightforward answer could be that they have material value. It could be that they have sentimental value, even if they don't, like, even if she doesn't worship them per se, like, even if she's ready to believe spiritually in Jacob's God, but that, these are comforting. They were figurines that she played with as a child, that she saw her mother worship, that whatever, like, she feels like she has ownership of. There's lots of possibilities.
In the women's commentary, the sense that I got was there was a conversation with Jacob. I don't know if it was Leah and Rachel, but that Laban, is that how you say it? Laban, wasn't very fair to Jacob.
Right.
And my interpretation without realizing it was that she ran back and got the idols, I don't know, out of
Spite.
Yeah, and perhaps also because they were valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be because they answer him saying, have we still a share in the inheritance of our father's house?
Yeah.
And then they come to the conclusion that they don't.
So
maybe she wants a little something for herself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that is my sense. Again, I don't remember if I got this from a midrash or from the red tent or just from my brain, because the Torah itself never gives us very much information, but that it was sort of a, like, that this is mine. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the religious aspect of it, but just that, like, I'm gonna take what's owed me because I know my father's not gonna give it, and we're like running away because he wants to cheat Jacob out of the flock. Like, that's part of it.
Mhm.
Right? Is that he's frustrated that Jacob's spotted and striped sheep have been so successful, and so he wants to renege on his plan, which, like, on his deal, which at the beginning, the outset was already he was trying to cheat Jacob. Like, he already thought he was giving Jacob, a not good deal, and it kind of blew up in his face, and now he wants to renege on it. And so they're running away and they're taking what's theirs. And so I think that was always my sense, was that there was this, like, last minute sort of impulse grab from
Mhm.
Rachel of, like,
If I was a mother with children and I was running away, I would grab things that were like toys.
yeah, sure. Let the kids play with these
And
old
I would,
figurines.
to me, it happens every day. I walk out the door and I go, oh, okay, I gotta grab the toys.
Mm-hmm.
A Lego set of the idol.
Yeah.
Makes a great cartoon.
I wonder what the attitude of Jacob would be about letting his children play with them as toys, because then it's very clear you're not praying to them if they're toys, right? But maybe he'd be worried about it setting up a confusing relationship with idols, and then if they're the same, I don't know how like uniform household idols were, if everybody's was shaped the same to look like a particular god, or if every household kind of had their own designs. So if they are uniform and then they look like somebody else's god, that could be confusing for children. I don't know.
How many toys were children used to having in that time and culture?
None.
Didn't you start working as soon as you got weaned?
I mean, they would have still had things to play with. I mean, in like ancient cultures, maybe it's less common in the nomadic culture that Jacob and his children, how they lived for a long time. But in like Sumerian ruins and settlements and stuff, they find like little straw dolls, or I guess straw would be too decomposed, but whatever. They find like evidence that the children had toys, had dolls. And even if they had to go to work, it would be the kind of thing of like, you know, you give the kid a toy broom or rake or whatever, and they like help you. And really they're playing or whatever, but they're also learning how they will do this chore once they get physically strong enough. And little girls played with dolls so that once they were strong enough to hold their younger siblings, they could help nurture and babysit while the women were weaving, or like that kind of stuff.
I think an idol could be kind of similar to what we would think of as action figures or superheroes today.
Yeah. Do you think it had like moving robotic arms?
I think
A playroom full of them. I never thought of them as idols before, but now I will.
also, the translation of idol, like maybe there's some nuance to this thing. Does it really indicate that they're like worshiping it, or maybe it's just like a figurine?
Well, I think there's definitely the implication that Laban worshipped them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Rachel ever did or intended to. Let's see, can we get any better explanation of this word, terufim? Nope.
That's kind of not surprising since the people who wrote the Bible wanted to make it clear that idols were not good things.
Right. Yeah.
I would say it's possible that the people who found these writings later on were people that wanted to make sure that nobody was going to worship idols. But maybe that what actually happened was she just took some toys and wrote about it because it's so important for
To have
mom.
toys.
They were tchotchke.
Yeah.
Tchotchke.
Tchotchkes.
Tchotchkes. Yeah. So the word, it's a word that like doesn't exist outside the Bible. So we don't really know the word that's used here for idols, terufim or teraphim. So we don't we don't have any like cross comparison context to know what it really means. In the book Deathless, which is another work of sort of modern midrash, it posits that they were like the ancient equivalent of your like salesman card or whatever, like that these were a market, a symbol of your particular brand of your wool sales or whatever, and that Levon had name recognition in his area, and as they moved on, Rachel wanted to be able to still sell Jacob's wool, and so she stole the figurines to be so that people would trust their brand.
Like the Nike whoosh.
Yeah. And how brands knockoff brands that want to catch your eye will try to mimic those things, those recognizable
Yeah.
symbols. Yeah. So we don't know. We also don't know. So in the red tent, she is literally on her period. And so there's also this like scene of like desecrating the idols. Like she wants them, like I said, for her own sort of emotional reasoning or spite against her father or whatever. But she clearly doesn't worship them because she's willing to get blood all over them. She puts them in the straw underneath her. But in the text, we don't know if that's real or if she just says that to freak her father out and make him go away.
And I guess what I like about Midrash is we can make up our own story
Yeah, exactly.
that fits.
That fits.
Do we, Laban refers to Leah and Rachel's children as his children. You're taking all my children away. So do we think that was common in those days to refer to grandchildren as children?
Yes, that actually is pretty common. I think we could still read it as particularly narcissistic for Lavan because we have no reason to believe he ever actually valued his daughters or grandsons because he doesn't behave very nicely. So there could be sort of like a double-edged like manipulation tool for him to pull that now. But part of why that would work is because it was an expected thing that like families did live in multi-generational households and like that the patriarch of the family, as long as he was still alive, like all of the descendants were his children, whatever.
Were children considered property or valued more as property?
Kind of. I would say less in the like literal way that women were. Like they didn't necessarily have the same kind of like resale value. But they were, I mean, they were economically promising, right? They could work the fields. And they were a sign of like your own wealth, your virility, like, you know, your legacy, this idea. I don't really know how much we can expect that even Lavan knew about Jacob's blessing, you know, that his children are, you know, the beginnings of the tribes of this great nation. But I think there's still sort of that seed in his head or in anybody's head of that time of like having more descendants means like you're more important. You're the patriarch of this great people. You have a whole tribe. It's not just your own little, you know, nuclear family, you know. So there was status and value to children.
Not in and of their own right, but what they could do for you.
Right, and what they represented.
Right.
Yeah, David.
Yes, when we talk about the families and the children and all that, and we talk tents, what were the tents? I mean, I'm trying to picture, and I keep seeing Coleman tents up there, but of course they weren't that sophisticated. And I'm trying to understand, were these big? Were these tiny little just rags held up with some kind of bowl, or what were they?
It was probably a combination. I also sometimes have trouble picturing it because then, like, you know, for example, like the Devar Torah I posted for last week's Parsha for this past Shabbat posits that, you know, when it says Isaac pleaded on behalf of or opposite his wife, the Midrash says like they went into different opposite corners of the room and prayed facing each other. But when I picture like these tents, they're like teepees, right? So like what's a corner of this room? So it's a little vague, and I have trouble holding the image in my head, but I think most likely it would have been like a Bedouin settlement where you would have one large tent that would be like a canopy kind of thing, or like a
Without
circus tent
sides.
kind of
Yep.
thing. Like
Uh-huh.
it would be very large and kind of open, and that would be where the family or the clan would eat their meals together, and maybe where like the women would do the weaving and chitter chatter during the day and whatever. And then there would be smaller sort of like pop tents where one or two people would sleep at night.
I'm just imagining them carrying around all this cloth with them when they marched on to some other place, and it,
Yeah. Right. Well, that's,
What the camels were for.
that's what the camels are for, right? And the donkeys and the whatever is
sure.
to fold all that up and put it back on them. But yeah, it would have been, but that's still true. I mean, there aren't so many nomadic Bedouin left, or at least not in the Israel area. Maybe there are more in like in Saudi Arabia. I don't know. But so it's a little different, but in the Bedouin settlements I've seen, they're still sort of, and they have houses, but their like central meeting area is still like a big tent, and like a garden tent kind of thing. And there is this sense of like, if they needed to, they could pack that back up and move 3 miles south, or whatever, to the next place in the desert. So I think that's how it was for a long time in antiquity, is that you didn't build, that there wasn't necessarily like cement, nothing was permanent, and you just put up things that you could take back down easily. And even if it meant like it's too much, I could imagine that there would be families that, you have a fever breaks out or something, and you lose some members of your family, and you're ready to move on, but now you're like down 3 adults or whatever. So you leave the tent behind, and like, what's the worst, like, it's not, on the one hand, like they didn't have much, so everything had immense value, but on the other hand, like there was no monetary value really to anything. So they move on, they take their sheep, and then when they get to the next place that they want to settle, they skin some new sheep, and like they got to eat anyway, so they make a new tent. That's sort of how I imagine it. I'm not 100% on that part, but based on what I do know of like desert peoples, that's how I picture it.
It makes
True, but it's
they
based
make-
on movies. Oh,
ahead.
Based on movies. Sorry.
Yeah.
It would
based
make
on-
sense they make the canopy out of the animal skin.
Right.
Yeah.
So
No Coleman days.
no Coleman, no canvas even,
I was gonna say,
Waterproof.
at some, they must have also used, if they were able to weave, then they would use that cloth to cover, I don't know, the floor, the walls,
Right. Yeah. They would have, right.
So they would have used some
weaving would
cotton
be
and-
like reed mats
yeah.
were popular for the floor.
Well, it probably didn't rain a lot.
That's true. And when it did, there was flash flooding, so you couldn't save anything anyway. But yeah, But also like leather is pretty, I mean, now we think of it as like, you don't want to get it wet because we're so precious about our stuff. But if your main concern is not like how it looks, but about you just staying dry and warm, like leather does have natural waterproof
Yeah.
qualities because it's skin. Like what would happen? Like, you know, it
Yeah.
repels water. So that's this week's Torah portion.
Very good.
This was fun. Welcome back, everyone.
Yes, thank
See you
you.
next
Thank you.
Monday.
It's fun for me.
Really nice
Thank you.
to see everybody. Thanks, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.